Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Mr. Hussain. As a fellow MEL practitioner, I know that what we're about to cover today is the absolute foundation of our work, designing field surveys. Getting this right is what separates a good evaluation from a great one, so I'm really glad you're here to sharpen your skills with me.
And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? Good quality data is the absolute bedrock of any credible impact evaluation. I mean, without it, our conclusions are just built on sand. That's precisely why mastering survey design isn't just a nice to have, it's non-negotiable for every single one of us in the meal field.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to walk through the entire survey lifecycle, from the very beginning, defining our data needs, all the way through sampling, designing the actual survey, implementing it in the field, and finally managing the data. Think of this as your step-by-step guide to building a rock-solid evaluation. Let's dive in. So where do we start? Well, here's the thing. Every great survey begins not with a question, but with a purpose. This first stage is absolutely critical. It's where we define what data we actually need. And for us, as meal professionals, the key is to anchor everything, and I mean everything, in the project's theory of change. I want you to think of the theory of change as your strategic map. Seriously, it's not just some document that sits on a shelf collecting dust. It is the blueprint that shows the causal pathway from your activities all the way to your ultimate goal. For us as evaluators, it tells us exactly what we need to measure along that path. Okay, so how do we actually use this map? This is how we turn that theory into practice. We use the theory of change to break down our data needs into three very specific categories. First up are primary outcomes. This is the big picture, the main goal. Second, the intermediate indicators. These show us how we're getting there. And finally, and this is so important, the moderating characteristics, things like gender or location, which help us understand if the program works differently for different groups of people. So we know what to ask. The next logical question is, who do we ask? And this brings us to the absolutely crucial step of sampling. Look, it's pretty rare that we can survey an entire population, right? It's just not practical. So instead, we take a sample. And the goal here is really simple. We have to be sure that the findings from this small group can be confidently generalized to the larger population we care about. If our sample isn't representative, our conclusions aren't either. It's as simple as that. Now, the gold standard for getting a representative sample is what we call probability sampling. It's a three-step process. First, you have to clearly define your population. Second, you get your sampling frame. That's a complete list of everyone in that population. And let me tell you, as practitioners, we know this is often the hardest part. An incomplete list is a major source of bias right there. Finally, you select your units from that list with a known probability of being chosen. All right, so let's break down our three main options. Simple random is the purest form, but honestly, it's often impractical. Then you've got stratified sampling. This is your go-to when you absolutely need to compare specific subgroups, say male-headed versus female-headed households. And then there's cluster sampling. This one is a real lifesaver when your population is spread out all over the place. You might randomly select villages and then sample people within those villages. It's super cost-effective, but it does come with a trade-off in statistical precision. Okay, so we've got our what to ask, our who to ask, and how to select them, but now we come to the million-dollar question. How many people do we actually need to survey? This is all about making sure we have enough statistical power to confidently say whether our program really had an effect or not. And listen, here's a pro tip that's going to save you a lot of headaches, and maybe even some money. Collecting baseline data before your program even starts can feel like an extra cost up front, but it dramatically increases your statistical power. By measuring your key outcomes beforehand, you control for pre-existing differences, which often means you can get away with a smaller, less expensive sample for your final survey. Okay, here's another common trap we can fall into. We often test multiple outcomes at once, right? Maybe income, health, and education. Well, the more things you test, the higher the chance you'll find a positive result just by pure luck. To avoid these false positives, we need to adjust our calculations. The Bonferroni method is a simple way to do this. It basically just means you make your test for significance a little tougher for each outcome you add. All right, we are now ready to get into the nitty-gritty and build the actual survey instrument, the questionnaire. This is where we shift our focus from sampling error to minimizing non-sampling error. The way we craft our questions can either introduce a ton of bias or ensure we get clean, accurate data. Now, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this slide, it's this. Questionnaire design is a cycle.
It's not a one-and-done deal where you just write some questions. You have to group them, order them logically, and then, critically, you pre-test, you revise, and you pre-test again. This cycle is absolutely non-negotiable if you want a survey tool that's worth anything.
Think of this slide as your personal checklist for writing great questions. Keep them short and simple. Use everyday language. Ask about the number of goats a person owns, not the total value of their livestock, if that's more natural for them. And please, always, always pre-code your answers where you can. It makes data entry and analysis so much easier and way less prone to errors. You know, you can have the most beautifully designed survey in the world, but if it's implemented poorly, well, it's basically useless. So this brings us to implementation. This is where the rubber meets the road. Success here really boils down to two things: rigorous training and tight quality control. Let's be clear, your enumerators are the foundation of your data quality, period, and their training must be built on these three pillars. They need to understand the why behind the survey, not just the what. They all need to be trained together in one place to ensure standardization, and most importantly, they need to practice, practice, practice. And this quote, it really nails the ultimate goal of implementation: standardization. Every single aspect, from how a question is introduced to the tone of voice used, has to be identical across your treatment and control groups. This is the only way you can be sure that the difference you're measuring is the real impact of your program and not just random noise from the data collection process. All right, we've collected the data, awesome, but we are not done yet, not by a long shot. The final phase is to get that raw information from the field into a clean, well-structured file that's actually ready for analysis. You know, these days, CAPI, that's computer-assisted personal interviewing, is really becoming the gold standard for a reason. Using tablets lets you build in logic checks and skip patterns right into the survey, which dramatically reduces errors at the source. It completely eliminates the entire data entry step. The only trade-off is you have to have a rock-solid system for backing up that data every single day. So, once all that data is in one place, the cleaning begins. And let me be clear, this is not a random process. It has to follow a strict, systematic protocol. We're hunting for inconsistencies, crazy outliers, and missing information. But the most important rule here, and please remember this, is that all cleaning must be done using a documented, replicable script. Never, ever clean data by hand in the dataset. This creates a transparent audit trail and ensures your results can actually be verified. Okay, let's bring it all home. Let's do a quick recap of the 5 pillars of high-quality survey design we talked about. 1. Start with your theory of change. 2. Use probability sampling to get a truly representative sample. 3. Treat questionnaire design as that iterative loop of testing and revising. 4. Invest heavily in standardized enumerator training. And 5. Follow a strict, replicable data cleaning protocol. Get these 5 things right, and I promise you'll have credible data you can actually trust. And with that, we're at the end. Thank you so much for participating in this session. I really hope this framework helps you strengthen your own impact evaluations. If you found this training useful, please subscribe for more practical sessions on monitoring, evaluation, and research. But before you go, I want to leave you with a question for you to really think about. What is the single biggest challenge you face in your own survey design work, and which specific step from today's session are you going to apply first to start solving it? Think about it and go put your learning into action.